So we discussed a lot about computing, caches, vectors, etc. We'll see another aspect of a machine is that a machine is not running alone in its side. There is an operating system handling it, which means that at some point it can possibly, we'll see, impact a bit your performance. So we'll open the roof of the operating system and try to look how it's working inside and how it can impact our way of programming. Here I will mostly focus on the memory management side, not the I/O side, which would be also another problem. But we will focus on what is impacting the compute. So I will give a small introduction to remind a bit what is an operating system and what it is doing and why it's there. I will give some details about the paging policy. We have discussed about the pages and the virtual memory before. I will remind a bit more in details what is virtual memory, so we will know better how it's working. I will discuss again the NUMA to remind what it is and how it is inside an HPC allocator, how it can impact the performance of an application. We will see the page zeroing, how sometimes putting some zeros in the memory inside the kernel can also impact your performance, possibly, and the conclusion. So just a bit of advertising before. If ever you are interested about the memory management topic, there is a great document online, which is a bit old now, but still true globally, which is what every programmer should know about memory, which is a very great document. It's very nicely done by Ulrich Draper, one of the developers of the glibc. And it explains from the transistor up to the application, how it's working, going from the operating system to malloc to everything. So you have all the layers explained on all the paths. So it's very interesting. It's a long document, but you can read it part after part if you are interested. Everything I will present here is some results which are extracted. I mean, part of them are extracted from my PhD. So if ever you want the document, sorry, it is in French. You can get it at this address. So an operating system. Up to now, we discussed a lot about loops, and again loops. We discussed about buffers, about GPUs. Next week, we will discuss about that. CPUs, a lot of things, cores, NUMA, cycle, vectorization, SSC, AVX, prefetchers, registers, and wraps. This will be tomorrow for GPUs. But we forget something in that. We zoomed a lot on the CPU and thinking we are alone on the CPU running on it. Okay, that was our view up to now. The problem is that the real life is, up to now the vision is a bit if there is the application and the hardware under wood. That's what we described for all the week. The problem is that the real life is a bit more like a rocket. We will go up and take some back on the full machine to see how it's working. And in practice, the real life is more like this. There is an application, and under wood there is a framework, possibly, you are using. I don't know, OpenMP, Cycle, or everything you are using to make your parallel application. Under wood, there is some system library, the glibc, for example. There is under wood a kernel. And everything of this is millions of lines of code. This is not a small library which is called inside your program. So 1 year I should count the number of lines which is behind printf in practice. This should be very interesting, but this is millions. So if you want to tune printf, you need to tune also those 1 million lines which are called. And in beyond, in bottom you have the hardware. So now your goal is not to optimize an application running on hardware, but an application which discusses with all those stacks. And this is not the same story. And if you make some mistake, you can go like Ariane 5 for the first try, and you go your rocket go in the right direction, and you destroy it. Just to remind a bit the context in which the work I will present here has been done. So memory is a critical resource now. This is the memory wall I discussed already on the last presentation. And it has a growing impact on the performance. The data movement between the GPU and the RAM is also a big problem. So we are clearly today in what we call the memory wall, even if the things has improved a bit because the CPU has not progressed as fast as they had in the past. So if you look on a CPU today, you will see that the most gain you have on the current CPU is not the CPU itself, but the RAM, which is faster. You also have a problem because if you have a faster computer, not most of the time you don't limit yourself on a few megabytes to compute on, but possibly a terabyte of memory to manage. And you need to manage this space. Huh? This is millions of allocation again, or billions possibly. This is not for free. In the past, we were saying that the decreasing memory per core was a problem. Today, this is not what we are seeing. The memory per core is a kind of stable or going even a bit up. But the context of the work was done at a time where we were asking if we are already at a limit on the number of bytes we can get per core to make some computation. Oh, sorry, I forgot to translate. The caches. So in order to optimize this problem about the memory walls, the founders about the CPUs, they added some caches. So they said the memory is slow. So I had, when you speak about the CPU, you have two things. You have one side the data management, which is inside the memory, and on the other side the computation, the treatment units. The problem is that your link here is very slow. So you added some cache, as we discussed a lot this week. So I will just explain again. We have the L1 cache, the L2 cache, because the small cache is fast, but is small. And if you make it larger, probably it will be slower. We will see why in the next slides. You replicate this unit, so you get two cores in your machine, and you want to share an L3 cache between those cores to get more data in the cache. So this is the hierarchy you have today. In most of the CPU you have. The L3 cache, we have seen that some Mac hardware have only an L2 and not an L3. So they have a very big L2 and no L3. So it depends on the architecture you are on. The hierarchy can be different. The common size you have for the caches, cache L1, this is most of the time 32 kilobytes. Now you found also some hardware with 48 for some reason which you possibly can understand with what I will explain next. The L2 is roughly between 256 kilobytes or 1 megabyte. This is roughly the size. And the L3, this is 24 to 32 megabytes, quite common on a large server. So the operational data, if you have some caches, you have the data inside the memory. And if you want to access data inside the memory, you need to copy it over all the cache hierarchies. This is what we call inclusive caches, which means that if a data is present in the L1, it is also present in the L2 and also present in the L3. Notice that there is some specific architecture which can use also a different kind of cache, which is exclusive, where the data is present only on one level of cache and not present on all the whole hierarchy. This is not what we use on x86 architecture or ARM architecture. This is most of the time what you find in a standard computer, an inclusive approach where your data is copied on all the hierarchy. You also have some prefetchers, which were discussed before, which to take out the data in the cache before you need it. So it's ready when you really want to access it. So this is already a lot of things to optimize. I plot here a performance. So this is on an old CPU, but the performance of the L1 was here. A few, let's say, two cycles to add to access the data. When you go to the L1, L1, 2 cycles per to access a member. L2, we are at 6 or 7 cycles to access. L3, 10 cycles, and memory, 20 cycles. Hopefully, the kind of gap you find on an old CPU. If you make some tests on a new CPU, there is a benchmark I give you in the memory VM. You can play with it. Sorry, it's not tuned for every CPU, so possibly the graph has some jitter, depending on how you run. But you will find something like this. Now the memory is more close to 10 cycles, something like this, not 20. So the gap has been reduced. And in the past, it was even more. It was possibly 50 at some years.
This is for main memory?
For main memory, yeah. Here, I mean, when I'm here, I'm outside the L3, so I'm in the main memory. The L3 cache is here. Mm-hmm. So I can show an example on Must, for example. If you go in labs, OS memory, sorry, cache access, you get a benchmark. Oh, I removed the, no, I'm not in Must. Yeah. So, cache memory. You have a benchmark, and if you run it with the run script, so it makes the binding to bind one instance per thread on the CPU. So I'm not using hyperthreading to make the measurements, and you will get a plot like this. So this is on Must. So you will see something is that on the new CPUs, the gap between the caches has shrinked a bit. Here in the memory, we are at 10 cycles, and the difference between the L2 and the L3 is relatively small. And now it's 20, I don't know exactly the number, but between 20 and 30% of gaps. This explains why on this machine you don't see a big difference with the L1 blocking, because L1 blocking you are passing from this line to this line, so you gain a few percent, not too much. But when you pass from the L3 blocking to the L2 blocking, then you can get this gap in terms of performance. Okay, but notice it has reduced over years, so possibly we don't know, in a couple of years, possibly we can dream that it will shrink to one cycle to access data in memory. But we are still not there, so I think it will take a moment before that. Array of structs, I will not do again because Pierre has already explained. You know that in your cache, if you make an array of struct, and you access only one member of your struct over your array. For example, you have a cell like here with U and V, and you make a computation only on U. Due to the cache lines, you remember that in a cache, when you access to, for example, this first U value, you will fetch all the orange part of, all the orange part of the cache line and put it in the cache, which means that in your cache, you have UV, 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 but you use only U. So you double the bandwidth you require to access your data. Okay, this has already been explained quite well in the previous presentation. Me, I will add something. Already, they didn't give you some measurements, but the measurement is this kind of stuff. You pass from SOA to not SOA, but to AOS. You lose roughly, it's how many? 30, between 30 and 40% of performance, which is quite a lot in a simple example. If you stress more the memory, it can be more. Here I have just two numbers. It's quite a small problem. Now we can do worse. You can put your data in a list instead of a vector. You know std list. The std list, to store the data, you have your elements you put in the std list. So the size t, which I make here, std list size t. I have my u element I put in, but to manage the list, which is a linked list in practice, there is two more elements in the list. Sorry, where is my pointer? Here, pointer and pointer, which point to the next element. Oh, sorry, it should point here. To the next element, or a pointer pointing to the previous element. So if you use an std list already, you have three values in your memory for one which is useful. Okay? So take care of the container you are using, because if you use an std list instead of an std vector to access the memory after that, you will again pay a price, just like the array of structure we have seen before. But it's even worse. Here I forget something. The std list make a malloc for every element you add in the list, okay, to select an address somewhere in the space. And malloc, how it's working, malloc, when you need to make a malloc allocates you some data, the part you allocated. For example, you make a malloc size t, okay, new size t. You allocate 8 bytes. Malloc will add you a small header with 2 pointers inside. or 1 pointer plus some informations, which is 16 bytes. So already for 8 bytes allocated, you have 24 bytes reserved for malloc, I mean, total. Malloc also need to feed some alignments. So if you take the one from glibc, the default allocator from Linux, it requires to align all the blocks to 16 bytes, which means that if you allocate 8 bytes, like here, you have your two pointer in the header, plus some padding to keep the alignment in practice. Which means that for one element of 8 bytes, I allocated 32 bytes. Okay, so I have 32 bytes in my memory. So now if I came back on my std list, this is more this, I have the header of the allocator plus the 2 pointer of the std list plus your data, which is 8 bytes, plus the alignment to feed the requirement for the allocator. Now, in your cache, there is a small problem because you can put one element for 8 bytes, for 64 bytes. One element per cache line, roughly. If I look here, my cache line stop here, and I put only one element on the cache by feeding the full cache line which has been loaded. So 8 times the bandwidth to access my elements. Okay, so take care of the structure you select to make your code, because otherwise you can quickly kill your performance. Also the memory consumption, because it says here that to store one element, I'm using 8 times more memory. And in terms of performance, I should have put, I have put it afterward. No, I forget. I have the benchmark. I didn't make the charts. There is a benchmark to just show that in the source code, which is available on the example. If I go in 5OS memory, sorry, I will zoom so everyone will see more. If I go in list vs vect, I just made a small implementation. Maybe I can show the code. So here I make a benchmark where I access to a container in a loop. Okay, after having put a lot of elements inside, and I made it on top of list or std list or std vector, just to compare what is the gap. So I say std vector, but if you use an hash map, a tree, or something like this, you get the same kind of trouble in practice. I can launch. I count on cycles per element, the metric which is given here. So to fill, of course, it's more efficient to fill a vector than to fill a list, because I don't have many mallocs when I fill the vector, so this is expected. Fill is, of course, faster with the vector. But the computation, if I don't know how it is stored in memory, I can say, well, I compute on many elements which are already there in memory. I should have the same performance if I don't know the layout. But due to the layout, I pass from 6.9 cycles per element to 1.8 cycles per element. Factor more than between 2 and 3, okay? Just because of the layout of the memory I used. And I'm not making an intensive computation, I'm just going through one array. So if you make a real computation with 2, 3 arrays, your performance will go down even more. So the caches, what we have done a lot, if you don't consider the blocking, what you do with the Gray Scott analysis, you have a large segment which is 30 megabytes or 20 megabytes, 30 megabytes for our case. You loop over all the mesh linearly. This is a default implementation we had done up to now. If we didn't discuss the blocking, we have discussed on Tuesday. So if you access linearly, what you are doing, you load the first part in the cache, you compute. You load the next part in the cache, you compute. And if you make the next step, you have to load again the data in the cache and you compute, and you load again the data in the cache, you compute, which means that you are either here or here in terms of performance. Okay. If we try to make several steps in the same while we have the data in the cache, this is what we did with the pyramid. We are more in a case where we fetch the data in the cache once, and then for the steps we are making, we are close to here or here, depending on which cache we are using. Okay, the gain we have seen before, just to have everything in place in red. Now you have to take care of something. Sometimes you have this kind of architecture. Some of you have some Core i9, which has this kind of unbalanced core representation. There is some high performance core on the left and some low performance core on the right. Okay. Now, if you run on this kind of machine, you have to take care a bit of what you are doing. So first, if you want to understand the performance of such a machine and tune your code, possibly try to limit yourself to run only on the left part, so you have a single kind of core to make your analysis. Okay, don't try to make your analysis with some unbalanced hardware, because otherwise you will lose yourself in a strange conclusion. But you have also another question. Let's say I have six threads I want to run. How I can distribute them over the machine? Several ways. First solution, I make them packed, close together, okay? Which is nice if they share some data, because if they share some data, they will benefit from the possibly, here I'm not have an L2 cache which is shared, so it's too stupid what I'm saying. No, yes, it is okay. Those two threads, if they are discussing a lot together, like two people talking all the time to make the job, it's better to make them close, okay? Because they will discuss through the L1 cache. You're okay? Now, if they never discuss together but use a lot of data, so requiring bandwidth, is it a great placement to place them close together? Any idea? No.
No, it is not that good.
It is not, yeah, because I have a smaller cache. I mean, I have only 32 kilobytes, for example, of L1 cache to share between both applications. And if they both need bandwidth, they will fight on these 32 kilobytes to get it. So ideally, if my application is requiring bandwidth, ideally I should spread the threads over the course so they have more bandwidth, of course being less efficient to communicate between themselves. Okay, because now, if the core 0 need to communicate with the core 1, the data should go in the L3 and come back to the L1 on the other side. Okay, because to communicate a core, it passes from I mean, when a core wants to communicate with some atomic operation between one core to another, it goes to the higher hierarchy, which is common. Okay, so it's less efficient to communicate, but more efficient to bandwidth. So it depends on the application you have, this kind of binding. You have to choose depending on your case. So to choose that, there is two keywords. So first, with OpenMP, OMP proc bind, you have seen that up to now I was using true, if you remember, in the past days. But you have two other values, which is close, which makes the binding which is easier. Oh, I don't want it to zoom. Yeah, okay. You have close, which says to pack the threads as you can, and you have spread to say put one thread over one core or over two core, depending on the number of threads per core you have. Okay, it has meaning. So of course, only if you have less threads than cores. Just one thing also, if you want to use half of your machine here, only the left part, you can use hwlock bind. Sorry, make a mistake here. Bind. hwlock bind and say you want to use the core 0 to 5, so it limits your application to this cores. Now there is a question. You have seen that we made a lot of optimization up to now. We made vectorization, cache blocking, tiling, everything. Can we do better than what we have done? That's a great question at some point. So either you go with Macao. The problem is that there is two resources in practice you have in your machine: the memory bandwidth, which you want to stress as much as possible if you can, and the computation side with the computation unit, which you want also to stress as best as possible. To know where you are, depending on your machine, on those two metrics, there is the roofline model. So the roofline model, you try to make a plot with, on the x-axis, the arithmetic intensity, which has already been described by in the previous days. So the arithmetic intensity, this is the number of flops per bytes for making the computation. Okay, you divide the number of flops you have done by the bandwidth you have used, kind of, which gives you the point in the x-axis. And on the y-axis, you put the computation performance, so the flops per second you have. Okay, the faster you are, the higher you are here, and the less bytes you are using to make a compute, you are on the left on this chart. Okay, the more data you are using to make your computation, you're on the right. Then you see that there is two lines which show you the limit of your machine here. For the performance, you know that your machine cannot compute more than what the computation unit can do. So you have a wall on the y-axis, which is here, the peak flop per second you can do. And you have also the memory bandwidth, which is a limit you cannot go over of your machine, and which is in this chart represented as a diagonal line going here. So now you can check if your code, your loop, is on the side of being limited by the memory or being limited by the compute, or ideally being limited by both. So you will use all the resources. So this is what we call the roofline plot. This is a theoretical model you can use to try to see where your loops are placed on compared to the hardware you have. So this you can get with Intel Amplifier. Intel Amplifier, this is one of the tools of one API, which permits you to generate this kind of chart for all the hot loops you have in your application. So if you look, for example, on Grayscott, at the beginning with the naive implementation, so just the vectorization, we were on the triangle points, so limited a bit by the bandwidth. When I'm making the L1 blocking, I'm going up a bit in the performance. This is on my laptop, so not on a server. I'm going a bit over on performance, and if I'm making the pyramid, I'm still going a bit up. And now I'm limited by the memory bandwidth of my application, of my machine. And here the DP vector at peak, which probably says that we can possibly go a bit higher, possibly go up to here with floating points computation. So we still have a gap, but not sure we are able to reach it by making some tuning of the code. Okay, but you can look how your code is progressing over that chart to see which limit you are hitting in your application. Here we are a bit in the balance. We see here that we are bound by compute and memory. So we are bound by both. So we are kind of in the middle of the river. So it will be very hard to make better than what we have already, clearly. It's easier when you are on the memory side, you know that by making caching, you will go up easily. If you are on the compute side, by making vectorization and more tuning on the computation, you can go up. When you are here in the middle of the both, it starts to become a bit hard to know what to do to make a better code.
Use FMA.
You can probably it's already used, but not enough, not for the whole computation. So this is probably what makes us lower than what we can have. So we discussed about the caches. So remind, caches. We will discuss again about caches next to add something on top of it. NUMA. So NUMA, we already discussed a bit about NUMA. So just to remind the cache hierarchy, so NUMA, it is a specific memory which is attached to a specific CPU. And to access to this memory, you need to go through the other CPU to get access to it. You can get some very difficult, some complex nodes with a lot of NUMA nodes, possibly. AMD has made this kind of stuff also, like Intel. And we will come back to NUMA later. But remind that now you add some stuff on top of that. You want to manage your memory. So when you want to manage your memory, most of the time, you call your application is calling glibc to make some malloc or free. These are two functions you might know to handle your memory. and probably you don't know the two which are underwood. It's mmap, munmap, and mremap. So when malloc in the application wants to have some memory, it needs to request itself some memory to the operating system and to get it, which is done by those two calls in bottom. We will see that there is a difference between those two sides of the memory management call stack. But the goal at some point is to use efficiently all those calls. So malloc, you already know the semantic, malloc, realloc, free, or new or delete. New or delete in C or C++, it's going back directly to malloc. Behind new, this is malloc, which is called. Just to remind the virtual memory space, so in practice, you don't access to the physical address in the memory space, but to the virtual memory one, which is a nice thing, because it's a bit, how to say in English, I will mess myself to say this part. The physical memory, you have a few gigabytes of memory to store, but let's think your application wants to use the machine fully. Okay, you want to fully fill the 1 terabyte of memory you have in your node. You will probably have some holes, depending on how you want to place the memory. And if you want to pack everything, it will be very hard to know where to place the next segment you want to allocate. A bit like in your flat, if you have a lot of stuff in your flat, to make some new one, I mean your new stuff you bought and coming back in your flat, you don't know too much where to place it. Same thing for the allocator. To solve the problem, in some ways, the virtual memory is a great thing because it is very big compared to the physical space. It is roughly 128 petabytes today, the virtual space you can walk in. So you can put malloc is working inside this space, can put the data wherever you want in this space. Up to the operating system then to translate to the pages in bottom with the page management 4K per 4K. Okay, 4 kilobytes per 4 kilobytes. So there is a translation unit, which is called the MMU, Memory Management Unit, which is responsible in the processor to translate automatically the virtual address in a physical address every time you want to access an element from a pointer. It adds the cost on the road, of course. Then up to the operating system to manage the translation, to choose the physical page which is placed in bottom of the virtual one. This is a very old concept which has been invented in the 1962 years on the Atlas computer. So this is very old, the virtual memory system. And it is a great thing in computer science. The mmap and the munmap and mremap call I was talking you before is responsible of allocating a region in this virtual space, which is multiple in terms of size of the page size. So with mmap and mremap, you can allocate only memory segments which are multiple of 4 kilobytes. This is why malloc is there, because malloc is responsible in practice to split those segments in smaller ones. And if you want to allocate 8 bytes, for example, you want to split your page in smaller segments, which the operating system cannot do for you because it manages only pages. And malloc is responsible of splitting your red block here in smaller one. So your malloc make a mmap to request a large segment and make the splitting to distribute your blocks inside itself. This is how it's working. So mmap is responsible of the large allocation, and mmap is splitting for the very small one, kind of. This is what I said. Malloc is responsible to hide the pages to the developers. You don't want, as a developer, to see that there is some 4K blocks under you. Otherwise, you have to manage yourself that your allocations should be multiple of this size. And you don't want that, of course, in your code. It's already enough complex like that. The origin of the concept is interesting. This is some people working on storage, on some kind of running tambour to store some data with some punch cards. This has been invented by Fritz Rudolf Gunsch in 1956, theoretically. So you have seen there was a gap. It has been put in a computer in 62, and invented theoretically 6 years before. Because the problem is to make it in practice running efficiently. So in practice, the operating system maintains a page table, a table of pages to translate the virtual address into the physical one. This page cannot be a direct map giving an address, a virtual address and a physical address, because otherwise you get a very big map, because I have 128 terabytes to address, too big to be used. And in practice, most of this space will be empty, because your application is using only a few gigabytes or a few megabytes inside this very big space. So it is done with a tree, which is done like this. You have a global directory, an upper directory, a middle directory, and a table and offset inside the tree, which is giving at the end the pointer to the page. So it is interesting in terms of memory space, but now it makes a complexity for the processor. Because now the processor, every time you make an access to an address, it needs to walk from the register which points the page of your current process and walk over all the pages to get the physical address from the virtual one. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. Okay? So let's think that in the processor, you need to make 6 steps every time you translate an address, which is quite a lot. So in practice, they added in the processor something which is a TLB, translation look-aside buffer, which is a cache also, again, which is responsible of storing the translation which has already been seen before. So in practice, you don't translate all the time the addresses, but the one you are accessing a lot. This TLB is quite small. In practice, you can address just a few megabytes with this cache. So which means that your std list example, if in memory you have to jump everywhere in the memory, in a large gap, you will see that the TLB will have a problem because it will lost the translation he has seen before due to the fact that you are jumping everywhere and you manage a lot of addresses everywhere. Yes, this I can skip. The TLB, I said, is small, but there is one way to make it bigger. So the TLB, in practice, in some, I don't know today if it's the same size, but the number of entries of the TLB is 1,024 entries. Okay, if you multiply by 4K, it means that you can address 4 megabytes of memory. Possibly on the new CPU, I didn't look in the documentation, it's possibly a bit more, but I think it's not more than a few megabytes. So one way to increase the size you can address is to make some bigger pages, which is called the huge pages, 2 megabytes or 1 gigabyte pages on x86 architecture. So you can also have on your system different page size, which can be used depending on what you are doing. At some point on Linux, they enabled them by default, and now they disabled them again, which by default is enabled only if you require them. So it depends on the server you are running on. Sometimes you're running on small pages, sometimes you're running on old pages. For example, on Must, it is enabled, and if you take your laptop, it's probably disabled. So it depends on the operating system you are using, because it has some side effects, mostly on the IOs, which is less performance with huge pages. And as the laptop makes most of the time IOs, it's a bit a problem. For these 2 pages, I mean, you have to think that you need to implement this in the operating system. So to manage the different page size in the operating system, which is already a complex thing. Linux, this is 2 million lines of code or even a bit more. And you have to patch the Linux kernel to handle this kind of pages inside. Good luck. This was my internship at CA I was discussing before. So FreeBSD has a nice implementation in 2002, and we see that Linux has the current implementation which is used, which is a transparent huge pages, which is available since only 2011. So you see that sometimes in the hardware they add some new feature, and you have to wait years that the operating system are able to support it. This is not coming out of the box to support everything. This I will skip, because I will take more time to explain. The NUMA, as you remind that we were speaking about pages. When you make a memory allocation, first, the segment is not mapped physically. This is what I said 2 days ago. When you make an mmap at the beginning, it says you are allowed to access to this segment, but I didn't give you pages because I don't know if you will really use it. For example, if you have a global variable in your code you never access, no need to use some physical memory to store it, okay? And when you make the first access, you will get a page fault, which is said, this is the name we are saying. You access the page, it is not there, so the operating system gets a page fault, so it will go to search to find the page, put the page, and then you came back to the application, which can run and compute with this page. The application goes through the page, make its computation, then it arrives to the next page. Not there, page fault. Put a page fault, put a page fault, put a page. As we have said already, if the thread 1 is on the NUMA node 1, the page goes to the NUMA node 1, and if the thread is on the NUMA node 2, the page goes to the NUMA node 2. Nice. Now we need to add one thing on this draw. We have discussed the NUMA, the pages, and we forgot the cache, how it enters in the loop. If you have a cache, and you want to access this green element, how you find it in the cache? You have a cache of, we say 16 megabytes for the L3, for example. So you have an element of 8 bytes you want to find in a cache of 16 megabytes. So you have 1 million entries? No, how many? Yeah, 1 million entries in the cache. So you search in entry 1, not there. Entry 2, not there. Entry 3, not there. Entry 4, not there. Huh? Like this. And it takes hours to find the data in the cache. Not possible. Okay, you cannot do that way. So in practice, most of the caches, what they do is what we call cache coloring. Is that it says that every cache is split into ways. This is the vertical box I have here. And each way is split into lines, which has a color. If your cache line you want to access is green, it can be stored only in 2 places, here in green or here in green. So now if I access to a data, I have only 2 cells, two positions to check. Position 1, position 2, it's okay. This is nice. But now if I want to access a third data, which is green, no place in the cache, so I need to evict one of the line, put my new line in place, which is fine if I'm not using anymore the old one, but if I'm looping over those 3 elements, my cache will start to lose a bit about performance, okay, because I cannot store everything in my cache. So you can say, fine, if I'm making a linear access here on my data, I should have green, yellow, blue, red, green, yellow, blue, red, green, yellow, red. So normally it fits in the cache quite well. Yeah, but that's forgetting something. Here it's a virtual address or the physical one? Huh? Virtual? No? Physical. So the CPU, it depends on the cache. But let's say it's a physical address which is colored. And now you have the virtual address space which is on top of it. And on top of it, you remember that we choose the page which maps to a physical one. And if you are unlucky, your operating system can choose a paging. When it chooses the pages he is giving to you, it can possibly give you green, red, green, green. Yeah?
This mapping from physical memory to cache is implemented in the hardware, right?
You mean the one in the bottom?
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is hardware specific. Is this coloring scheme like generally how most CPUs do this, or?
So this coloring scheme is done in most CPUs today. L1, L2 is like this today for all CPUs. L3, we will see that there is a different pattern because of the problem I will describe just after that. But L1 and L2, this is like this.
I think different cache architectures have a different number of ways.
Yeah, that's it.
And different number of, how do you call the lines?
The lines.
Okay, lines. Depend,
Yeah.
And I think it's dependent on whether, for example, you do streaming
Yeah.
or you do
Computation with many variables, with
computation,
many arrays.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It depends on the number of streams you are using.
But then how does even spatial locality work if the virtual memory is so different from the physical memory? I mean, in ordering.
You mean?
I mean, here we can see basically virtual memory is kind of random.
Yeah.
It's not like
It's
one
random,
after
but
the
we will
other.
see that statistically, with big catches, we statistically fall in some troubles due to statistics. Normally it goes well, but due to statistics, I will show some graph showing that there is a problem with that in practice. Due to the problem I explained, now they changed the L3 to not make anymore this kind of pattern so strict. But L1 and L2 is still like this.
The blue one is a theoretical one, or?
So the blue one is a system where the problem has been fixed.
Okay.
So here it's using the huge pages, because I will show you that huge pages is a solution for this problem. Okay. But if I have a perfect operating system which is behaving correctly, I should have this measurement. This is a measurement on the processor. And if I have a 4K management with random pages, I have this. Which explains that sometimes some people are saying, yeah, but you should not feed your cache fully. You remember that when we were discussing the pyramid, I said you that I'm using a smaller value than half of the CPU. This is due to this. So I totally avoid to fall in this problem if it's present. The huge pages, they solve the problem because the huge pages, they make 2 megabytes. So 2 megabytes in most CPU, it covers all the colors of a CPU. So one page is covering one way, mostly. So as it's covering one way, you have the color which is nicely done, which is in the right order. If you want to make some theory, you can also, for those who are making physics here, to model this problem, this is exactly the Boltzmann electron distribution equation, which is used to model that in the CPU. Exactly the same statistical problem. So this is interesting to look at. I will not describe here, this is just for fun. So the huge pages, as I said, the huge pages, they are so large that they cover all the colors in one go. So if you are using 2 megabytes pages, you have the colors which is nicely placed. You have green, yellow, blue, red, green, yellow, blue, red, green, yellow, yellow, blue, red. So you have the nice coloring which is done by default. So it looks nice, kind of. There is some operating system like OpenSolaris or some others which can do page coloring, which means that when you are requesting a page, instead of giving you randomly a page, it's taking care of the color of the page to map something regularly. Okay? OpenSolaris does that, Linux don't do it. So during my PhD, I say myself, one of my topics was to study this problem and to say, Linux is wrong. I mean, it should take care of that. And it is a problem for HPC that it is not done. So let's remember, Linux, this is 4K random. OpenSolaris, this is 4K page coloring. And FreeBSD, this is transparent huge pages. 3 different politics. Which one is the slower when we run some applications? Who guess? So I take an application from a numerical simulation from a PhD student at CIER, and I run it on several OS on the same machine. And who you guess is the worst? Or the best? Who thinks that Linux is the best? Nobody. Who thinks that OpenSolaris will be the best? Making the coloring. FreeBSD with huge pages? 1, 2, 3. Theoretically, this is what we expect, with what I described before. So this was what was described in the literature, because everybody was saying, we should do page coloring. This is a problem known since a long time. And there is only 2 systems which does it, so we can say, Linux is wrong by not making it. But if we take an application, I take a numerical simulation, and I run on a machine, the same machine, same compiler, same everything, except the operating system. And now you have this graph within blue FreeBSD. Huge pages is close to 2 times slower. And we can do it in parallel also, and it's even worse. I will show the graph after that. Here it's in sequential. I search a bit, because at the beginning I say myself, yeah, but there is a problem with the IOs or with something else which the operating system can make some troubles because I changed the operating system, the malloc, the IOs, something like this. No, the function which was slower was doing something like this. x1 plus x2 equal x2 plus x3 plus x1 up to x9. So eight arrays which are summed and stored in a 9-1. So just computation. So I tried to change the memory allocator because I say myself maybe the memory allocator was not the same. The scheduler, I tried to bind the threads so they cannot move on the machine. So the scheduler is not involved. And this let only the operating system paging policy as a difference. So we can change the memory allocator at some point because possibly this is the only thing which can make a change between the operating systems because they don't have the same one. So I made a memory allocator, a very simple one where I can handle a bit the way they choose the addresses. And just changing the memory allocator, now I have this. So Linux is still fast in red. Linux with transparent huge pages is now slow. FreeBSD is now fast. And OpenSolaris is now slow. Like, come on. I just changed the memory allocator, yeah?
What memory allocator did you change it to?
To one I developed, which was very simple, so I can understand what happens in. So I just changed the memory allocator, so the only thing which changed is the choice of the addresses, because I don't place the element at the same place in the memory, okay? So I change, I shift, for example, an array a bit on the right, another a bit making it in the left, and I run again, and it changed my performance. Come on. The choice of the address is changing the performance, but this is not something I expect in practice, no? But in practice, I looked a bit, and in FreeBSD, as they wanted to use the huge pages, they said themselves, yeah, but because I am allocating some 2 megabytes huge pages, ideally my memory allocator should align on those pages. So now I have this. If I have 3 arrays instead of the 8 of the standard L1 cache, just to make the draw a bit smaller, I have my array 1, which is aligned on 2 megabytes. Okay, so it starts in terms of color. As I said, the huge pages, it's the same pattern for the time. Huh? It's green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow. For the B, it's aligned on 2 megabytes, so green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow. For the C, it's aligned, so green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow. Now I'm looking my L1 cache. But when I'm making A plus B plus C, I'm accessing 3 elements. A, okay, it goes in the cache. B, okay, it goes in the cache. C, small problem, it don't go in the cache. Okay? So due to the associativity of the cache, your paging has some impact on the performance of your application, possibly. Okay? And it can be quite a lot, as we have seen. Just to give some typical size now. If you have a cache, L1 cache, I said that before it was 32 kilobytes, so 8 of associativity. Now you have seen some caches of 48 kilobytes, which means that you can use up to 13 arrays easily without problems. Okay? So as long as you don't put more than 12 arrays in the same loop, it's fine. You have some problems only when you use more than that. On the L2, it's roughly 10, depending on the CPU, of course, and the L3, it's most of the time 12 or something like this for the associativity.
What are the numbers? What are they for?
In green, it's the associativity, the number of ways.
A number of ways.
Yeah. the number of columns here. So the number of arrays you can access in parallel in some ways in the loop without problems. But here you have 12, but the L3 is shared. So it's shared between all the cores. Now, if all cores is accessing some elements aligned on the cacheways, what I'm killing here is not the L1, but the L3. Which explains why in terms of performance, I'm going here. Because I'm losing the L3. So the solution in this case is just one thing. You shift a bit your allocation addresses. So you put an offset. So now, for example, you just offset the C variable from, let's say, 8 kilobytes, 2 pages. And now you have the nice colors and it's going well in terms of performance. Okay? So just remember one thing. When you align some arrays in memory, try to not align too much. Because if you align too much, you will finish in this kind of problems. Okay?
You mean when writing operating system?
But also in your application, when you are using POSIX mem-align, try not to put 4K, for example. This is a bad idea, or 2 megabytes, even worse. Because some people are saying that, yeah, I'm on huge pages, I want to be efficient on it, so I will align on the huge pages, like the FreeBSD allocator was doing, and it's a wrong idea. Okay. So normally, this is the operating system to take care of that for you, but don't make the mistake by you forcing the thing. Here, this is the example in parallel on the machine. As I'm trashing the L3, this is even worse than the example I was showing before, because now I'm losing a factor 3 in performance instead of 2. Alors, the problem I explained is now still true on 2 caches, the L1 and the L2. The L3 has been solved because now the L3 is so big that they have to use some other ways. The L3 now is split in slices. So this kind of, if there is many L3 caches shared between all the cores with a ring between all of them to make them communicating. And each of the L3 has their own associativity, which already makes the associativity larger in terms of number. And also, in order to improve the thing, Intel has made some nice thing, is that they have made some hashing function on the addresses. So before placing the data in the address, they hash the address. So it's kind of randomly distributed independently of the pages you have chosen. So I don't know if this is because of my work. Probably they found their solution on their side. But it's clearly going in the same idea I was saying during my PhD, that the huge pages, you need to take care to mix the colors if you don't want to have some issues. So clearly on the CPU, the problem is solved on most of the Intel processors now since a few years. So you should not have the problem on the L3 on Intel. On AMD, this is also solved normally because I use the same kind of architecture for the cache. For IBM, it was not solved on Power8. Power9, it was possibly solved, but I don't have access to some, so I don't know if it's done. On ARM, it was not done on a V8 and V7, and I don't know on the new architecture, but I'm not sure it is done yet. And probably it is not the case, so I don't know. If someone has some ARM to make the measurement, it could be great. But still, it is true on the L2 and the L1 of every processor. So think when you are making hyperthreading, this is one of the reasons also for why hyperthreading is losing performance. Because if you mess up yourself in the L3 cache, you know, L3 cache, I said it is 8, the associativity. But if you have 2 threads running with the same alignments, you cannot use more than 4 arrays in the cache before having some troubles. Don't forget one thing, malloc, when you make a large allocation, beyond 256 kilobytes, malloc is calling directly mmap, so returning you an address which is aligned on 4 kilobytes. So your block is by default, I mean, for the large allocation, all your arrays are aligned on 4K by default. So if you are using in a loop more than 4 arrays with hyperthreading, you are falling in this trouble. by default. This is a problem of the memory of most of the memory allocator which has done today. So with Grayscott, we are not using a lot of arrays, so it's not a problem. But when you are using more complex computing, you can hit this kind of issues. If it's the case, the solution is just to split the loop, making if you have eight arrays in your computation, you split the loop in two, each having 4 arrays, and you will see possibly your performance going a bit higher in the cache.
And the size of the arrays, what did you say about it?
As long as it's, if you are on Linux, the problem arises as soon as you have 256 kilobytes.
Okay.
256. Below, it's making some splitting inside its own thing, so it chooses the address a bit randomly. But beyond this size, it directly makes mmap, so you are aligned on the page address directly.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I mean, in practice, the page address plus the header of the allocator, so 16 bytes, but all aligned the same way. So sometimes, if you have some, I mean, if you want to check the performance, just shifting a bit the addresses of your array, you will see if you are in the problem. Huh? This is a nice way to detect it. You put plus 64 on your address, and you will see that if your performance is going up, you will see the problem. If you want, you have a small code which make a demo of that in the exercises I give. So it's 4 color issues. And if I'm running, here on the left, this is with alignment, and on the right, without alignment, by desaligning the arrays. So up to 8 variables, the delta is 0.5. And here, when I'm going beyond 12, because this is what we have in this cache, I mean close to 12, I start to see the gaps between the two implementations going up.
Yeah, usually we have 8 lines, right?
8 on most, I mean, if you have 32 kilobytes,
yeah,
you have 8 lines. If you have 48, it's 12. I mean, it's 12 times the number of pages in practice what you have in the L1. L1 is 12, I mean, 32 kilobytes, okay? If you take the smaller one, it's 8 times 4K, which makes 32 kilobytes. So if you make on your laptop, you will probably see the problem going up from here, from 8. If you are running on a higher-end CPU, you will see the problem arising from here, 12. We can make the plot if you want to see. Where I am, cache access, coloring. I just made the run, so you can get the plot. It's small. Here you see the gap. The red line in bottom, this is by desaligning the arrays, putting an offset. And the top line, this is by getting the alignment. And in X, I have the number of arrays I'm handling in the loop. And you see that the gap of performance can be a factor 2, 3, 4, more. This is the same function. I just, before calling the function, I just shifted a bit the array with an offset and calling the same function.
Okay, so the number of lines is the limit of the number of arrays.
Kind of, yeah.
And the number of ways is the limit of, is it the limit of something?
This is hardware.
Yeah, it's
the choice of the hardware. So most of the time, they consider that you don't use more than eight arrays in your loops, which they consider that it is fine for you.
But what is the limit of the number of the arrays?
The number
the lines or the ways?
The ways.
The ways.
Yes, the ways.
Okay, and the lines are the limit of?
No.
Of what?
The lines, the only limit of the lines is the number of bytes and the size of the element you fetch from the memory in the cache. The block size, which is 64 bytes on most processors. I mean, any you have today is 64 bytes.
So do you have to take this into account when writing the code?
You have to take it into account due to everything I was discussing before with the structure of arrays or arrays of structs. This is where it impacts.
Okay.
But the number of ways, I mean, you can increase the number of ways, but then it complexifies. I mean, it elongates the delay, you will find your element in the cache, because now,
You can
if you
search-
double it, you have more, instead of 2, you have 4 elements to check. Huh? Without forgetting that the CPU has to look in the cache for every instruction. Huh? For every cycle, you need to find in one cycle where it is in the cache, the data. This is already quite challenging to have 8. Huh? Because in one cycle, you need to make 8 checks.
Yes, yes.
So you cannot grow it however you want in terms of hardware.
And if you make only mostly consecutive,
Access?
like for consecutive accesses, it
There is
would
no
be
problem.
better to have lower number of ways or bigger number of ways.
But if you make consecutive accesses, ideally one way is enough.
One way is enough.
Yeah. But then as soon as you have 2 arrays, you have some troubles. So this is why there is a balance between both to find. And 8 looks to be a kind of correct thing they found. What time is it? I have up to 6. Huh? I have up to 6, huh? That's it. Now there is some other problems with the addresses, which arise on some processors only. This is a 4K aliasing. Let's say you write this loop for I from 1 to size and making AI equal BI minus 1. One can go wrong with that. I can make the measurements. No, this is not what I wanted to do. There is an example. So for the people who have an Intel processor or some others, probably ARM has the same problem. This is probable. You can use the 4K aliasing example, which is here. No, I'm not in the right window. Where is my terminal? I want my terminal. CD 4K, no. 4K aliasing. So here, I'm making the loop I have shown before, A equal B minus 1, crochet I minus 1. I can show you the code. This loop. Okay, this code. A equal B minus 1. It's simple, huh? So we should not have some problem with that, huh? Normally. Life is always more complex than what we thought. So here I just allocate my arrays either aligned on the pages, which is the default, huh? Remember if your array is a bit big, or by shifting a bit by some elements. Okay, I just add some offset. Now we run. 4K aliasing. But here I'm on AMD. No. So it depends on the processor. Some processors have solved this problem, but some still don't have. So here we will see there is no difference. 16.9 cycles per access. Okay. Now I will run on my laptop. This I don't want. CD labs, CD5 res, CD3, 4K aliasing. And me on my processor, I have a small problem, which is 4K aliasing. Compute. There is a small gap. Oh, small. So I already a few percent, huh? In practice, there is a problem because when your hardware wants to access to a page, to a data in bytes, it needs to ensure that the 2 addresses you are writing are not the same location. You know, if you write to 2 addresses, to 2 blocks, if the blocks are the same in some threads in parallel. Now for the prefetcher, sorry, I missed myself. Remember that you have the speculative execution. Okay, so you already explained. We already explained a few days ago that speculative execution make you executing several instructions in parallel,
Out of ordering.
out of order. Yeah, out of order and speculative, both. So this loop in practice normally translates like this. You need to load B. I need to load B0. Okay, first element. While I'm loading B0, I cannot do anything in parallel, so I'm loading B0. Then operation, I need to store my register into A. So I'm loading A1 and putting and storing my data in. At the same time, I can speculative exec or out of order exec and load the next B. Okay, so in terms of loading, because I can make several loads and store in parallel because there is several pipe, I can have both both made in parallel. If B and A are the same address, is it a load to write and to read an address at the same time? It's not a load. If A and B is the same address, I cannot. I mean, it's wrong to make a load and a store at the same time. So in the hardware, there is some check to check that the addresses you are making load and store in parallel is not the same. The problem is that the check, to be faster, they make the check modulo 4K. They don't check all the bytes of your address, just a couple of them, because it's enough most of the time. But in some cases, you find some problem because now, in my case, because I am aligned, I cannot load at the same time A and B because they are aligned on 4K. So the addresses modulo 4K make the same number. So the address say, no, but this is, for me, this is the same address, so I cannot load them in parallel. Okay? And this explains the performance gap I have shown before. So you see that the choice of the address is not something totally naive, where you can ignore it totally. So
you can avoid this by not making the size of your arrays 4K, or it's not
the size, but the alignment.
The alignment, okay.
Again, if I shift a bit the array, if I shift it a bit, I avoid the problem.
But how can you know exactly the alignment where it is?
Which one is the good one?
Well, how can you check if they're aligned? Like you get there.
If you want to check, I mean, you make the address modulo 4K, and you will see how it is.
You have to have access to their memory address.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you have access to their address, you can check by printing the address and making a modulo on it. This is what I did here. The case I give you is making it here. I make a modulo 4K and it is aligned. Modulo 4K equals 0, so I'm aligned on 4K. Also because I asked here. So here it's a mistake of the glibc malloc, which is by default aligning things on pages when it's large. Default of the memory allocator, which is not fixed yet, so you have to take care. This example comes a bit more quickly than some others. A equal something minus 1, it's quite often you are doing it. Let's come back to another problem. So you see, I mean, what I want to show here is that the operating system is all the time in the loop of your performance. It's not, you cannot consider it's just the application and the hardware. There is something in the middle and it can impact sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes quite a lot your code. Here it's an example on a bit an older processor. I mean, the gap was even even higher. In practice, Intel has fixed a lot the problem since a long time. Now I will come back to a larger application. So not looking anymore the alignments, but another problem, which is also arising when you are computing. So I had a big numerical simulation I was working on at CEA, so multi-physics, multi-material, refinement, mesh refinement, etc. I mean, you put everything you can do in simulation and you put in this code and you have a bit what it was. 1 million line of C++ code, 75 millions of allocation in 5 minutes on 12 core. So lots of mallocs, C++. And the goal was to change the allocator, as I explained when it was Tuesday. So to test the Linux memory allocator, the one from FreeBSD, gmalloc, tcmalloc, and Howard, which is a research memory allocator, which has made, open the path to the two other ones. Just if you want to test, if you have an application making a lot of memory allocation, sometimes you can try to change the memory allocator just to see if it's changing the performance. It's a nice test to do. And you can take I put the link of the free I'm presenting here, +1, memalloc, which is a new one, which I didn't work with too much. And to change the allocator, you compile it, and you just LD preload the library in your program, and it will change the memory allocator automatically. So to make the try, it's no need to recompile. You just have to LD preload the library, and it will automatically change the allocator you are using. So if you want to test, it's quite easy to do in practice. You just have to compile the allocator, which most of the time depend on nothing, and to LD preload the library on your application. And if you see some gaps, probably you have some issues. Okay, that's a nice test to do. So on a 12-core machine, for example, what I have here. Yeah. On a 12-core machine, we see that changing the allocator on this application is not changing too much the performance a bit, because we see that some of the allocators have more time on the system than the others. You know, when you make a time my program, you have 3 numbers which are given: the elapsed time, the system time, and the user time. So here I'm printing user time in purple, the system time in orange, and in clear orange, the idle time, which is the time which is lost due to the scheduling. Okay. So we see here that tcmalloc is more efficient because in some ways it's not triggering the operating system, not discussing too much with him. gmalloc is making more calls to the operating system, and glibc a bit of calls, but not too much, but with some idle times, depending on how it's working. On the memory consumption, I already discussed that before, but I will not explain here, but there is a big gap depending on the allocator. So if you are memory limited, sometimes probably using gmalloc is a nice way to reduce the memory footprint of your application, because it's more efficient in memory, pack more the things. But on the parallel machine now, we see that there is a big gap. So tcmalloc should be faster in theory, where it is not. It's increasing a lot the user time because it's not taking aware of the NUMA. The NUMA I discussed, the NUMA layout I discussed, the memory allocator should take care of it also for you. tcmalloc is not doing that. So when you are running on a parallel machine with NUMA, tcmalloc is the wrong choice. gmalloc is nice for this, but to keep the memory low, it discusses a lot with the system. Every time he has to free some memory, it gives the memory to the system, and if you ask it again, he has to ask to the system, give me, I give you the memory to you, you give to me, I give to you, you give to me, and so the system starts to discuss a lot with the application, and you pay a high price due to that. But you reduce your memory footprint. glibc has a kind of balance between both, as is a kind of well done for most applications. But how to measure the malloc time? Do I do clock start malloc, clock end, or do I do something else? If I do clock, malloc, and clock, before making my malloc, I start my chronometer, I make malloc, and I stop. Did I catch everything?
You have to assign it. Not assign it, but I don't know. Give it some value to the
size. I give the value to the. I give let's say it's a large block. I allocate 1 gigabyte, for example.
No, I mean assign some value to the.
I assigned here PTR equal, so I make the assignment. Is there something missing for the measurement?
Well, this measures, I guess, the touch of virtual memory, but not the physical memory, because that only happens on first usage.
Right. You remember that there is a virtual memory which is in the path. So when I'm making malloc of my large segment, I get a virtual segment. And then I will pay a price for every page fault I will have later. So in practice, if I want to measure the time I'm making a malloc, I need to make the malloc plus making a first touch of my segment to get the real price. And, and the gap is not small, huh? Because the gap is that if I take a 4 GB segment, the malloc time in a million cycles is 0.008. So it's a million, 8,000 cycles, something like this. The first touch, 1 billion cycles. So when people are using perf in the back, saying that with perf I will track the mallocs. Yeah, but with perf you will see this time here, okay? But not this one, because this one is paid in your computation, not in your allocation, okay? So that's a problem when you're allocating. If you make a malloc free with some big segments, you will have the impression, because some people, they make that, they make some measurement of malloc, they say, yeah, but it's free for me. I mean, I measured, I passed no time in malloc. Hey, yeah, but this is your computation which will pass time. At least you're in it. So in terms of measurement, you will not see it easily in your profiling tools because it's hidden behind the first access. So in some way, perf is showing it a bit. You will see page fault in practice. So it's not hidden, but it will not be printed in malloc. So me, I studied a bit this problem because I had some issues due to that. Because most of the memory allocator, they do caching for the small blocks. If you allocate 8 bytes, they take a page, put the 8 bytes in. If you return the 8 bytes, it is still in the page, they kept the page, and later they give it back to you if you ask again, without discussing with the system. But for huge segments, they make mmap, munmap. So every time you free a segment larger than 256 kilobytes, it gives it to the system. Okay? Now I have a small problem. So this I will skip anyway, I don't care. If I make a measurement of the page fault, I want to measure for every page how much it costs to me to get a page. Okay? So I make a malloc, an mmap here, but this is the same for a large block. And I make a time distribution measurement for every access with CPU cycles. And I make a distribution. I get this. Here it's in sequential. Here it's in parallel. In parallel, it costs me more to allocate to make the page faults. So I can make a plot like this. If I have one thread, I pay 4 cycles per 4,000 cycles to make a page fault on the system. But now if I have all my threads making page faults, all the threads are touching the memory after making some allocations, I pay up to 128 cycles, 128,000 cycles. So it's not scaling. Your operating system is not scaling in terms of page fault, okay, when it's parallel at a large scale. On a smaller machine, it's scaling a bit, but not too much. If you have threads, it's not scaling because there is some locks inside the kernel. With processes, it's fine because every space is different. If you have some processes, every process live in their own virtual memory. So you don't have to take some lock to access this page table. But if you have some threads, they share the same one. So you can say, okay, page fault costs to me. So probably better to use larger pages because I will have less page faults. If I have 4K pages, I will have tons of pages to touch. If I have a 2 megabyte page in my segments, I will have less pages to address my segment. You agree with that? I do that. So I try to make my segment mapped with huge pages and to touch with many threads. So it's a bit better in terms of performance, but it's still not scaling because the performance is still going up. Down, sorry. The time is going up. So I win a bit of time in sequential by using the huge pages, which is the benefits I have here. But remember that a huge pages is 512 times smaller than a small page. So normally I have 500 of less page faults. So I should expect a speed up of 500. I have a speed up of only 40%. There is something wrong. So I looked, I opened the kernel. And if you look in the kernel, what you have a page fault. Okay, so the kernel gets the end on the hardware. You take a look on the page table because you don't want it change while you are looping over it. You check the reason for the page fault. Is a user allowed to access this address? Otherwise, it's segmentation fault. You make the first touch for the lazy allocation. You search a page in the page list. You say, I want a page. So you go to the list, you take a lock, and you search in the list to find a page. You take the page, you let the lock, and you give the page to the user. But before giving the page to the user, you need to do something. You need to clear the page. Because the page you take in the list, possibly before it was used by Firefox, and it can possibly contain your credit card number. So you don't want to give the page to another application. And what is the cost of this page clearing? A page fault for standard pages is 3,000 cycles roughly. The page clearing is 1,400. So 40% of the time of a page fault, it's not taking logs or handling the page table, it's putting zeros in the memory. And for huge pages, it's even worse, because I have 2 megabytes to put with zeros, which means that 90% of your time of allocating a huge page is putting zeros in the memory. So take care when you are making malloc and free and malloc and free with big segments, because you will pay a very high price in practice due to this on the system, mostly if you're in parallel, because you will pay the zero plus the fact that it is not parallel and not scaling. So me, during my PhD, I made a try, but it is not yet in the kernel yet. We didn't work for that for now. It is an idea to attach a cache. If you have a page on a process 0, it goes on the free list and wait to get a request, so it is required. So when the process 1 make a page fault, it gets the page and which is mapped in its space. Okay. Problem: this process 0 can be Firefox, and you can probably have written your credit card number in this page. So of course, before giving the page to the next process, you don't want to let it go. You want to erase its content. Security all if you don't erase the content. Me, what I tried is to put a local pool here. So when a process allocates a page, it puts the password in, and the page is not going down up to the global list, but jumping from the local pool to the application. This way, I can avoid to make the page clearing. You see? What is the performance gain of that? This. So on 4K pages, I'm with my kernel patch, I'm in blue, where we were in red before. So again, it was I forget the number, a factor. We are going from 10 to 2, 5 times faster, just by the cost of the page fault, by avoiding clearing the page in parallel. And on huge pages, it was that. With huge pages, as I removed the 90% of the cost of a huge page, we have a log scale here, which means that I win a factor 16 performance by avoiding the page clearing, which is quite nice. So I can key back in my application. This I don't want it. I didn't. Oh, what I did. I removed one chart that I should not remove. Where I have it? I removed it? No. Anyway, I have it here. You remember this chart I have shown you before in the past? Where it is? Here, this one. The gain which is here is exactly this. The 20% I gain here is by avoiding the page zero clearing. So you see that on a real application, you can gain by avoiding this kind of mistake to win 20% of performance. Okay. On a real application, 1 million lines of C++ code plus gigabytes of memory, millions of allocations, and everything, just by avoiding a mistake in the system. Where I am. So yeah, I will stop here for the examples. Where is my hand? So the paging, the virtual memory concept is a very nice concept which has been done by great people. So it solves a lot of problems, but we see that in terms of performance, it's posing us a lot of, some troubles, which we need to take care sometimes when we fall on this kind of issues. We can show here that it's been 60 years that we are working on mallocs, etc., but we are still having a lot of issues on this kind of domain still today. The NUMA is a big problem, and we can see that the impact of the memory management side is not all the time 1% or 2%, but can be far more in practice, so you have to take care about it. Okay? So take care what is behind malloc, because it can hit you a bit faster than what you expect. Any questions? Yeah.
Do most major operating systems have similar looking charts for scaling, parallel scaling issues with page faults?
So it depends. For example, Windows, for one time, Windows has made a great thing. For example, the zeroing, they solved the problem in another way. Is that on Windows, what they did is that they reset the page not on the malloc time, but on the free time. Which means that, yeah?
Do we agree that this is really replacing a bad workaround with a slightly less bad workaround, but really it should be the memory doing this, not the CPU?
Yeah, but as currently this is a CPU to do it, yeah. The good point of Windows is that as it is making, it is making it after free. With there is a kind of cron job which is running to clear the pages before it is allocated. So at the time you need it, you have some already cleared pages, so you get them immediately ready for the user. Which I think is a real, I proposed a very complex implementation with the cache beyond the process. I would say that on Linux, I should make the same things on Windows in practice. This will be simpler. This is, I never tried to push a patch about that, but someone should do it at some point. FreeBSD has the same kind of problem. OpenSolaris, I don't know. But Windows, no, they don't have. For once, they made a great thing. Better than Linux for one point. I tried to propose another approach with the cache I'm using, because we said in HPC, we don't want it to clear the page. Because still it uses some bandwidth, etc., which in HPC, we want to keep the bandwidth for the computation. So I tried to use another approach which was a bit more complex, but also more complex to implement and to maintain. For this, try to put to make the patch in the kernel. There is one line to patch to, because in the kernel you need to take care when you update the TLB, the cache, the cache which is handling the page table. You have to take very care on when you are flushing it or not, because otherwise you have some security leaks. So for this patch, I have one line where I passed 1 month. Here, no, I cannot put here. Here, no, here. And by looking for every line, if I can put at the right place. So this is the kind of patch which are not easy to do. Hopefully, as a user, you don't have to touch about that.
Does it make sense to like pin this local pool to some cache, or?
Yeah, this is
it
what I
possible?
did. I mean, this cache, which is this pool here, you can have it. You can have one either in the operating system or either in the malloc itself. The malloc can also have the cache inside the application and keep the memory inside the application instead of returning it. The problem is that the application consumes more.
Yeah, but like the OS is going to, if you take a lot of time to
To
get
exchange.
the data from the local pool to the process, it might go to the main memory, right?
Yeah.
Can you like pin it to the cache, or it doesn't make sense to do that?
Ah, no, you mean about the caches?
Yeah.
No, because the operating system, this is a bit why it give, I mean, Linux, if they give you a bit randomly the pages, this is for a certain reason, is that it gives you the last page he has received. An application return you a page, okay? Possibly this page has just been used. So it is in the cache. So Linux, when it is giving you a new page, it tries to give this one, the last one which has been returned to him. So possibly it is already in the cache, so you don't have to go to the memory. So Linux, in principle, try to be cache efficient about the page management. But in other way, it is less efficient in terms of coloring.
In terms of
Coloring.
Coloring.
As we have seen.
Okay.
But in some way, yeah, I did not explain, but in some way, Linux, if you run under Linux and not on FreeBSD, etc., Linux is more resilient about the coloring problem, because you see here that the 4K pages, which is random, is all the time good. So in some ways, they made less tuning, but they have less corner cases, which pose some problems. So this is also something when you are making some deep tuning inside your program. Sometimes you tend to also be closer to some resonance, which can make your tuning falling down quite quickly and very far. Il y a une question sur there is a question on Discord. Question on Discord. Which channel? Experts. Welcome, experts. How does this work on WSL? Frankly, I did not make some measurements. So WSL, it's using, I don't know exactly how they work. So for me, they made an emulation of the Linux API on top of the Windows one. So probably they use the Windows paging system, not the Linux one, which in principle, they will probably have faster results than under Linux. But I did not measure, so I'm not sure. But this could be a very nice measurement to do, yeah. You measure the time of the page fault, and you will see clearly if it's using the one from Windows or the one from Linux. I don't know exactly what they did. Because I'm not sure WSL is running a full kernel, but for me, they made some kind of emulation. But yeah.
It depends which version of WSL you're looking at. WSL versus 1 used the feature of the Windows kernel, which is actually cool, which basically allows it to pretend it's Linux. But it was also a huge pain to maintain. So at some point, Microsoft gave up and just used a virtual machine like any sane person would do.
So if it's a virtual machine, then
And that's called
you pay the price
WSL
of
version 2.
So on WSL2 is on first touch or free?
What you mean?
So WSL2 is first touch or free?
But it should be, you mean when it makes the clearing?
Yeah.
If it's a virtual machine, it will be Linux, which will make the free at a log time. Plus Windows Underwood getting a page, because you need to get a page from Windows also. So you chain both with a virtual machine. If it's an emulation, which I don't know which one they are using now, then it will be at free time. I don't know.
Okay.
But it will be interesting to make the measurement. I didn't think about that, so thanks for the question. So the question is, can this page pool allocation approach be re-implemented in user space to get the same advantage than the system one? Yes, we can, and this is exactly what I did during my PhD. So this chart here, this one is not with making the system patch, but user space one. So getting a malloc, which is making the cache in the application. The problem is that now you have a small problem, is that your application is consuming more memory. And also, now it's up to the malloc to handle your NUMA effects. Because now it's malloc which is responsible of giving you a segment which is nicely placed in terms of NUMA, not anymore the system page per page. Which is what I did during my PhD, because I made a NUMA-aware memory allocator, which is the one which is developed for the MPC framework at CEA. And by doing that, I was able to get this performance here, the 2 times performance, by having a memory allocator getting the pool inside the allocator itself, not returning the pages to the system, plus taking care of the NUMA in its side. Let's say that in some ways it was interesting, but I had a tendency to consume more memory. So it's a balance. But yes, it can be done, and this is what I did during my PhD. The next study I made on the system side was to try to avoid the problem in the application side and try to say we can possibly solve the problem underwood. But the problem is that we never took the time to push the patch to the Linux community. Yeah, PhD work. The problem of the postdoc where you don't have the time to make those things. Yeah.
I'm not super familiar with this, but is there any like research done with trying to do some of this stuff in kernel space with like eBPF and stuff so that you don't have to put it directly in the kernel?
Sorry, ask again the question. With eBPF, what?
Like, is there any type? I think eBPF lets you write some code and kind of execute some stuff in
Yeah.
the kernel without, you know, basically like executing code in kernel space. I was curious if there's any like research or stuff done for like memory related stuff with that. But I might be misunderstanding because I don't use
Yeah,
this
but
technology.
here you need to patch the. I mean, you know, in the kernel you have. I mean, every operating system you have a core part which is 2 things: the scheduler plus the page system. So in terms of patches, for this patch, you have to patch the very core of the kernel, where you cannot work with BPF or this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking if you wrote the memory allocation in user space already, like a similar type of thing that's pushed lower, I guess, down.
No, you cannot, because you have two. I mean, you have 2 layers. The operating system has to handle its part on the bottom with the pages, and you in malloc you manage the blocks, and the segments you ask to the system, and to split them. Okay, so these 2 things differently and both communicate. But BPF don't help you here. Or I misunderstood your question. Any other question remotely? I mean, what you should return here is that your operating system can impact your performance in a kind of way you didn't expect. So sometimes it's nice to look a bit with the addresses if you shift them a bit to see what you can do. I mean, if shifting an address changes something, it's probably that you fall on one of the problems. So me, at some point, I made a small allocator which was just randomly shifting the address and to see if it's changing the performance of the application. This can be done quite easily. And for the zeroing problem, malt can also be a way. If you see that you are making too much large allocation, it's probably that you are falling on the problem. Because malt is counting the number of mallocs, and you can find the large ones. So you can find them.
How much is a large one?
The large blocks which is allocated, malt can report you how many of them you have. So you can check with malt if you are not seeing too much large memory blocks allocated or deallocated. In Malt, I want to add a metric which report you this zeroing time, but I not yet did it.
What is considered a larger block was my how much?
For me, you have the problem when you are managing more than, I mean, if you are playing with more than 100 megabytes segments and allocating and freeing them quite oftenly, then you have some troubles. Any other questions?
About the number of arrays inside your loop, this is concerning the arrays you're touching inside the loop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Can you control the prefetching?
Strategy?
You
can ask-
Yeah, or is it there's a strategy in the OS, or can you?
For what? For the pages or for?
Well, in the beginning of the presentation, you had some prefetching probably from the memory to the cache or something like that.
Yeah. But you have it here. So here it was not prefetching, but reordering. The 4K aliasing problem? That's what you think about? Or
It was more in the beginning.
I just said that there is a prefetcher, but I did
Yeah,
not.
prefetcher.
I didn't discuss anything about the prefetcher. The prefetcher is handled only by the CPU. So the operating system has nothing to do with it. I didn't study more of this part of the prefetcher, so probably there is some side effects, but I don't know some of them.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that. For the prefetcher, if you want, the documentation is not that easy to read, but you have basically an Intel 5 type of prefetcher. And the strategy I used was to use all the 5 and keep the best one. Because you have different strategy of which blocks you go down in your caches or not, depending on the line cache, stuff like that. So you can
configure like for the whole.
Yeah. Basically, you give you said to the CPU, I promise you, I will at some point read this data, not to from here, and then you elaborate on that.
You cannot control it from the application.
You can put the intrinsics inside the application in a for loop, for example, if you want to read a lot of data, you can. But you have to play with them because the documentation is not, there is practically no documentation and the name are not really that nice. So you have to improvise a bit.
Maybe I can add something also. There was a question about if you make the allocator making the cache, what is the problem about the NUMA? Let's say you have 2 threads on your application. Okay, thread 1 on NUMA node 1 and thread 2 on NUMA node 2. So you say you allocate some memory block on the thread 1, which is now pinned on NUMA node 1 due to what we discussed, and you return it to the allocator by making free, and you say my allocator is making the cache, the pool. We said in user space. Now, if your allocator don't take care and return this block to the thread 2, now your thread 2 has a new block, but which is already mapped on NUMA node 1. So you see that if you are making the pool directly inside the user space, you need to take care inside the user space about the NUMA. This is where most of the current allocators are failing, because they need to distinguish the NUMA lanes which is attached to each thread. So gmalloc in some ways is doing it the right way, but not totally. I will not discuss here, but I made some improvement in my own one on this aspect. I don't know if I have some slides about that, but we have probably not because I might have removed. No. Sorry, I don't have the slide to explain the exact thing I made to. Yes, I have it here. I have it. So in my memory allocator, which I did, I had some kind of local app, so a kind of malloc, a specific malloc for every thread, which is exactly the same way that gmalloc is doing, plus a NUMA memory source. So when a memory allocator requires some memory, it asks to the memory source, which is a cache attached to my NUMA node inside the process, inside the application, on the user side. And then if this NUMA source has no pages, it asks to the operating system for some memory. The good point is now, as I'm structured like this, the pages, the exchange between the two allocators, which are here, between the same NUMA node is going only between those two, so locally. And those two threads, which are on another NUMA node, are exchanging only with the NUMA source, which is here. And both are kind of cut between the two. So there is no exchange between one NUMA node to another. Okay, so it fixes the problem. So, but there is a small problem in that, is that not all the threads are pinned. You know, there is some threads which are moving everywhere because you didn't bound them to one core or one NUMA node. And the problem if one of such threads arrives to put some segments which is badly bind in one of your queue, here in one of your cache, you will break all your application. So me, in my allocator, I had a trick, which is to make a specific kind of unsafe common memory source for the threads which were not bound. So the threads which were bound have the same common cache. The thread which is not bound have a common cache also, but not discussing with the threads which are bound. So I mean, if this thread is moving and putting some NUMA segments everywhere, they stay here in this cache, where the NUMA threads which are bound and take care of what they are doing, they are isolated in their own sub-allocator in some ways. This way, I was able to gain the performance I have shown before, which is the factor 2 I win on the big application. But it is not easy to do, to not consume too much more memory than what is required if you don't do that. So that's the problem. You increase the memory consumption of the application when you do that. Any other question before we stop?
This is just like you showed a few days ago, like you just bind them and then make the first touch, or something different.
You mean what?
Bind the threads to the core.
Ideally, you should bind the thread, yeah.
This is what you're talking about, or something else?
No, but my problem when I'm making malloc, NUMA malloc, my problem is that I don't handle myself the binding of the thread. This is the application. So either the application did it, or either it did it for all the threads, or either it did it for some threads. And if there is some thread not bound in the application which were moving because the library, for example, spawned some threads not limited to one NUMA node, it will break all the application in terms of NUMA. So me, what I try to do is to say I have an allocator dedicated for the threads which were bound, and another one dedicated for the threads which were not bound. So I don't mix both of them. And then you get the performance.
This is something you implemented, this allocator.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to detect the binding of the threads in the allocator, etc., which is not easy because you have to remember that the allocator is the first code which starts up. So you have access to no library to make it, I mean, to detect the NUMA, etc. So you have to do it by your own. So it's not a trivial thing to do.
Is this how do you call it, a page alignment, vector alignment, something you test in your unit tests?
No, no, like I'm saying, sometimes what I try is when I have a code, I try to shift a bit my arrays to see if I'm impacted by the problem. It's the simpler way to do it.
But you don't have a guarantee that the next time you run, it's not
sure.
going to be.
So what I did, what I did at CA when I was developing some codes for this kind of computation was just making myself a memory allocator, which is randomly doing it for myself with an LD preload. So I was able to just LD preload the allocator on the application, and it changed all the alignment everywhere. And I see if it changed something. So in one run, I was able to see it. But you can make it easily. You make a library which does malloc, which wrap malloc and just add some random offset in front of it. I mean, easy to do. But yeah, we should probably provide a library for the people to do that. Yeah.
Or maybe you can malloc like the size of the 2 arrays plus a little bit, and then just use half for the 1 array and
Yeah.
offset.
You can also do that. Yeah. If you want to ensure this is possible. I mean, I would say what I will retain from that is not to say to play with alignment, but to not play too much with alignment. Because I have seen sometimes some people, when I profile with Malt, I have seen sometimes some people aligning on 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes because it looks fun. But no, I mean, align on 64 bytes at most and let the system making the rest. This is a better strategy. Not try to align on 512 or 1 kilobytes or more. Beyond 1 kilobyte, it's a bad idea to align, except for the IOs if you really require. For the infiniment possible. For k-aliasing, there was when we were studying this problem, there was a funny thing at the laboratory I was on. It was a code provided by a company, which was very simple and making this kind of pattern. I mean, the question was more complex, but had one of these pattern inside. And there was a guy at the lab who were unrolling the loops, making vectorization, all the complex stuff. And at the end, myself on the current CPU, I had exactly the same performance just by shifting a bit the arrays, keeping the naive version of the code, which were already quite nice in practice. So sometimes before making some complex tuning where you don't read anymore of the code in the end, probably you can try to see if this kind of pattern is there. Because the problem of vectorization, unrolling, etc., is that the code is less readable in the end. So readability is also an important metric in practice. Also, what you can do about the performance, you say about unit testing, about the performance, there is one thing I'm doing is that I always keep the naive version on my end. When I make a tuned version of a function, I always keep the naive one. So I'm able first to compare the results, so they are still true all the time at runtime. So calling both functions in parallel, I mean, one after one and checking the results. And also to compare the performance, because it can arise that for an old architecture, you made a tuning because it was required. And then in future, because the memory speed is now faster, etc., you don't need anymore this optimization. In this case, maybe better to come back to the non-optimized one because it's easier to read. So never lose your naive version of your code. This is very important. Always keep it. For validation and for performance validation also. Also because sometimes I have seen never optimize first. Make the naive version, then optimize. Because I have seen a lot of times some people making, I vectorize, I unroll, etc., blah, blah. And then you take the naive version and you have a win of performance of, I don't know, 10%. But frankly, if it's 10%, keep the naive version. Because in future, it will be probably less. So keep the readable version and it will be better. So always make the simple version naive and compare the gain you have by making the tricks. Because if the tricks is winning only 5 or 10%, to be choose if it's really required. Any other question remotely before we stop? Bad password. And maybe we will stop here. No, there is an answer from. We'll stop here. You are free.